Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window of his spaceship and looked out at the beautiful planet below. The planet was called New Valerian, and it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The entire surface was covered with tall crystal buildings that caught the light from two bright suns. The crystals made music as the wind passed through them, creating sounds that were both strange and wonderful. 3 years had passed since humans first met the Valerians. Jake remembered that day clearly. He had been a young officer then, part of the first contact team that landed on their homeworld. Most alien species that humans had met before were either hostile or simply ignored Earth completely. The Valerians were different. They welcomed the humans with open arms and genuine curiosity. The Valerians themselves were amazing creatures. Were made of living crystal and silicon instead of flesh and blood like humans. They were tall and graceful with bodies that seemed to glow with inner light. They spoke to each other through musical sounds that could travel through both air and solid matter. When they were happy, their whole bodies would shine brighter. When they were sad, their light would dim. Dr. Lisa Campbell had been the first human to truly understand how the Valerians communicated. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms, and she had spent months learning their musical language. The Valerians were fascinated by human biology just as much as humans were interested in theirs. They would spend hours comparing how their two species were different and similar. Jake walked through the corridors of his ship, the EA's Liberty, and thought about how much had changed. The ship was now equipped with Valerian technology that made it faster and more efficient than any human ship before it. The Valerians had freely shared their scientific knowledge with humanity, asking for nothing in return except friendship and the chance to learn about human culture. Commander Ryan Phillips was in the training room, working with a group of Valerian soldiers. The sight still amazed Jake. The Valerians had never been a military species. They had lived in peace for thousands of years, never needing to fight wars or build weapons. But they were eager to learn from humans, just as humans learned from them. Captain Morrison, Ryan called out as Jake entered the room. Come and see what our friends have learned today. Jake watched as a young Valerian named Zethka demonstrated a combat move that Ryan had taught him. The Valerian's crystal body moved with surprising grace and speed. What made it even more impressive was that Zethka was using human-style tactics combined with Valerian energy manipulation abilities. Very good, Jake said, clapping his hands. Zethka's body glowed brighter with pride at the compliment. Valerians had quickly learned that humans showed approval through clapping and smiling. The friendship between humans and Valerians had grown stronger every day. Human children on Earth learned Valerian songs in school. Valerian young ones studied human history and literature. Dr. Campbell had established cultural exchange programs where humans and Valerians lived together on each other's worlds for months at a time. Ambassador Kate Sullivan had been instrumental in making the alliance official. She was a skilled diplomat who had negotiated treaties with hostile alien species before. But with the Valerians, there was no need for complex negotiations. Both species simply wanted to be friends and help each other grow. The results of their cooperation were remarkable. Human medicine had advanced by decades, almost overnight, thanks to Valerian healing techniques. The Valerians had learned human agricultural methods and were now growing food that could feed both species. Human engineers worked alongside Valerian crystal shapers to build cities that were both beautiful and functional. Jake received a message on his communication device. It was from Admiral Scott Matthews back on Earth. The message was marked as urgent, which made Jake's stomach tighten with worry. Urgent messages were rarely good news. Captain Morrison, Admiral Matthews' voice was serious when Jake opened the communication channel. We have received an official communication from the Galactic Council. They want to speak with you and Ambassador Sullivan immediately. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The Galactic Council was a group of 12 ancient alien civilizations that claimed to rule most of the galaxy. They had ignored humanity for years, treating Earth as too small and unimportant to notice. If they were suddenly interested in human affairs, it probably meant trouble. What do they want, Admiral? Jake asked. They want to discuss the Human-Valerian alliance. They say it violates galactic law and threatens the stability of the region. Admiral Matthews paused. Jake, I don't like the sound of this. The council has a reputation for being ruthless when they feel threatened. Ambassador Sullivan joined the conversation from her office on New Valerian. I've been expecting this, she said. The council doesn't like change. And our friendship with the Valerians represents a big change in how species interact in this part of the galaxy. Jake looked out at the crystal city below. Valerian children were playing in the streets, their laughter creating tiny musical notes that danced in the air. Human families had made homes here, and Valerian families had done the same on Earth. The two species had become more than allies. They had become family. What are our options? Jake asked. We can try to negotiate, Sullivan replied. But the council isn't known for being reasonable. They've been the dominant power in this region for over 1,000 years. They see our alliance as a threat to their authority, Admiral Matthews added. The Valerians have already refused to end their cooperation with humanity. Their leaders sent a message to the council yesterday, stating that they choose their own friends and allies. Jake felt proud of the Valerians for standing up to the council, but he also felt afraid for them. The Valerians were peaceful by nature. They had never fought a war and had no experience dealing with truly hostile aliens. The Galactic Council, on the other hand, had crushed dozens of species that had challenged their authority. Dr. Campbell entered the communication room. She looked worried. I've been monitoring council communications, she said. They're not just unhappy about our alliance. They're angry. They see the Valerians as traitors for sharing their technology with humans. They see us as upstarts who need to be put in our place, Ryan added, joining the group. I've been reading reports about the council's past actions. When they decide a species is a threat, they don't usually stop with diplomatic warnings. Jake felt a growing sense of unease. Valerians had trusted humans and had been willing to share everything with them. Now that trust might have put them in danger. The thought of his crystal friends being hurt because of their friendship with humanity made Jake's hands clench into fists. We need to prepare for the worst, Jake said. But we also need to hope for the best. Maybe we can find a way to satisfy the council without betraying our friends. Ambassador Sullivan nodded, but her expression was grim. I'll start preparing for negotiations, but Jake, you should know that the council's idea of compromise usually means complete surrender. As the communication ended, Jake stood alone in the room looking out at the peaceful crystal city. The Valerians had done nothing wrong except choose to be friends with humanity. They had shared their knowledge, their culture, and their homes. With humans, they had welcomed Earth's children as their own. If the Galactic Council wanted to punish the Valerians for that kindness, they would have to go through humanity first. Jake just hoped it wouldn't come to that. The Valerians were a peaceful species who had never hurt anyone. They deserved to live in peace, not to be caught in a conflict between humans and an ancient galactic power. But as Jake watched the twin, suns set over New Valerian, casting long shadows across the crystal buildings. He had a bad feeling that peace was about to become a luxury that neither humans nor Valerians could afford. Dr. Lisa Campbell was working in her laboratory on New Valerian when the attack began. She had been studying the way Valerian crystals grew and changed over time. The crystals were fascinating because they could store information and energy in ways that human technology could barely understand. Her Valerian assistant, a gentle being named Kethmore, was helping her record the musical frequencies that the crystals made as they grew. It was the Festival of Harmonic Convergence, the most important celebration in Valerian culture. The entire planet was filled with music as millions of Valerians sang together in perfect harmony. The sound was so beautiful that it could be heard from space. Lisa had been on New Valerian for 2 years, but she had never experienced anything like this festival before. The crystal buildings around the city were glowing brighter than usual, responding to the collective song of the Valerian people. Children played in the streets, their young voices adding high, sweet notes to the planetary chorus. Human families who lived on New Valerian had joined the celebration, learning to hum along with the alien melodies, even though they could not produce the same complex sounds. Lisa was recording the festival sounds when her equipment suddenly started showing strange readings. The sensors were detecting massive energy signatures approaching from space. At first she thought it might be part of the festival, but the readings were too strong and too hostile. Kethmore, she called to her assistant, "Are you seeing these readings?" The Valerian's crystalline body dimmed with concern as he looked at the data. "These are not Valerian energy patterns," he said in his musical voice. "These signatures are from warships." Before Lisa could respond, the sky above New Valerian suddenly filled with massive alien vessels. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. The ships were dark and angular, bristling with weapons that crackled with deadly energy. There were dozens of them, each one larger than the biggest human battleship. The Galactic Council had come to New Valerian. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Turner was at Valerian Station, space station that orbited the planet when the Council fleet appeared. He was leading a joint training exercise with human and Valerian military personnel. The exercise was meant to teach both species how to work together in combat situations. Though no one had expected they would need those skills so soon. "All ships, battle stations," Alex ordered, as alarms began blaring throughout the station. "This is not a drill." The Valerian soldiers moved quickly, but without the urgency that human soldiers would have shown. They had never faced a real enemy. Before, war was something they had only read about in human history books. Their movements were graceful, but uncertain. Like dancers who had learned the steps but never performed on stage. Alex watched through the station's viewports as the Council ships positioned themselves around New Valerian. The ships were massive, each one capable of destroying entire cities with their weapons. But what made Alex's blood run cold was the way they moved. There was no hesitation, no attempt at communication. They were preparing to attack. "Send a message to all Council ships," Alex ordered. "Tell them that this is a peaceful planet with non-combatant civilians. Demand that they explain their intentions." The communication officer, a young human named Pete Davis, tried to establish contact with the Council fleet. "Sir, they're not responding to our messages. They're ignoring all communication attempts." Alex felt a sick feeling in his stomach. The Council had not come to talk. They had come to make an example of the Valerians for defying their authority. On the surface of New Valerian, Captain Jake Morrison was visiting the Crystal Gardens, where human and Valerian children played together. The gardens were one of the most beautiful places on the planet, filled with singing crystals that created natural music. Jake was watching his own daughter, Emma, play with a group of young Valerians when the first missiles struck. The explosions came without warning. Massive balls of antimatter slammed into the crystal buildings, turning them into clouds of glowing dust. The beautiful music of the crystals was replaced by screaming and the terrible sound of destruction. The festival of harmonic convergence became a symphony of death. Jake grabbed Emma and ran toward the emergency shelters. But the Council ships were targeting everything. Parks, schools, hospitals, residential areas. Nothing was spared. Aliens were not trying to capture the planet or defeat its military. They were trying to wipe out every living thing on the surface. "Daddy, why are they hurting the crystal people?" Emma asked, tears streaming down her face as explosions lit up the sky around them. Jake could not answer. There was no good reason for what was happening. The Valerians had never hurt anyone. They had no weapons, no military that could threaten the Council. They were being murdered simply because they had chosen to be friends with humanity. At Valerian Station, Alex was fighting a desperate battle to protect civilian transports that were trying to escape the planet. The station's weapons were no match for the Council's war fleet, but he kept firing anyway. Every minute they could delay the enemy was another minute for innocent people to escape. Colonel Turner, his tactical officer, called out, "We're taking heavy damage. The station's shields are failing." Alex looked at the tactical display. 3 Council ships were concentrating their fire on the station while the rest of the fleet continued bombarding the planet. The station was doomed, but there were still civilian transports trying to reach safety. "All hands, abandon ship," Alex ordered. "Get to the escape pods now." That's an order. But Alex did not leave his post. He stayed at the weapons console, firing everything the station had at the Council ships. If he was going to die, he would die fighting. His Valerian friends and colleagues were being slaughtered, and he would not run away while they suffered. The station exploded around him. But Alex's last act was to send a message to Earth. The The message contained everything he had. Seen and recorded during the attack, Earth needed to know what the Council was capable of doing to peaceful planets. Dr. Campbell was trapped in her laboratory as the building shook from nearby explosions. Keth Moore was trying to help her reach the emergency exit, but debris was blocking their path. Through the laboratory windows, she could see the Council ships methodically destroying every structure in the city. "Why are they doing this?" she asked Keth Moore. "Your people never hurt anyone." The Valerian's light was dim with grief and fear. "We chose to be friends with humans," he said sadly. "The Council sees friendship as rebellion." An antimatter missile struck the building next to the laboratory. The explosion was so powerful that it cracked the crystal walls and shattered the windows. Dr. Campbell felt the building beginning to collapse as she and Keth Moore ran for the exit. They made it outside. But the scene that greeted them was beyond horror. The beautiful crystal city was being reduced to rubble. Valerian families were running through the streets, their musical cries of terror filling the air. Many of them were carrying their children, trying to reach shelters that were being destroyed as fast as they could run to them, Captain. Morrison managed to get his daughter to a transport ship, but he could only watch helplessly as the Council fleet continued its systematic destruction. The transport ships were slow and defenseless. Most of them were destroyed before they could reach the safety of hyperspace. Morrison's own ship, the EA's Liberty, was badly damaged and drifting in space. His crew was dead or dying, and his ship's weapons were offline. He could only watch as New Valerian died beneath him. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the beautiful crystal planet was nothing but a field of debris floating in space. 4 billion Valerians had lived on New Valerian that morning. By evening, they were all dead. The Council had wiped out an entire civilization in a single day. The few human survivors drifted in space, watching the ruins of what had been their second home. They had lost friends, colleagues, and family members. But more than that, they had lost their faith in the idea that the galaxy was a place where peaceful beings could exist safely. The Galactic Council had sent a message to the galaxy. Any species that defied their authority would be destroyed completely. Any species that allied with humans would share humanity's fate. But the Council had made one crucial mistake. They had left human survivors alive. And humans, unlike the peaceful Valerians, were very good at remembering who had hurt them. The news of the Valerian massacre reached Earth like a thunderbolt. President Helen Carter was in her office when Admiral Scott Matthews burst through the door without waiting for permission. His face was pale and his hands were shaking as he carried a datapad containing the survivor reports. "Madam President," Admiral Matthews said, his voice barely steady, "you need to see this immediately." President Carter took the datapad and began reading. Her expression changed from curiosity to horror to rage as she absorbed the details. 4 billion innocent beings had been slaughtered. An entire civilization had been wiped out in 6 hours. The beautiful crystal cities that human children had learned about in school were now nothing but floating debris. "Is this confirmed?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "We have video recordings from 17 different survivors," Admiral Matthews replied. Captain Morrison, Dr. Campbell, and 12 others managed to escape. They all tell the same story. The Council ships appeared without warning and began destroying everything. They didn't even try to communicate first. President Carter stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the capital city. Below, normal life continued. People went to work, children played in parks, and families enjoyed their evening meals. None of them knew yet that their friends on New Valerian were dead. "Call an emergency session of the World Assembly," she ordered. "Contact every world leader and military commander. And get me General Nathan Brooks immediately." General Brooks arrived within an hour. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old battles. He had fought in every major human conflict for the past 20 years. But the expression on his face showed that this was different from anything he had experienced before. General President Carter said, "I want you to see something." She showed him the video recordings from New Valerian. The footage was shaky and filled with static, but it clearly showed Council ships firing antimatter weapons at defenseless civilian targets. In one recording, a Valerian family was running through the streets. carrying their children and singing a desperate song for help. The recording ended when an explosion consumed them all. General Brooks watched the videos in silence. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes were hard as stone. When the last recording ended, he set the datapad down carefully and looked at the president. "What are your orders, Madam President?" he asked. "I want to know everything about the Galactic Council," she replied. "Their military strength, their weaknesses, their homeworlds, and their families. I want to know what they love most, so we can take it away from them." Dr. Sarah Martinez was working late in her laboratory when the call came. She was the director of Earth's Advanced Weapons Division, a secret government program that developed new military technologies. Most of her work involved theoretical projects that might be useful someday in the future. Now the future had arrived, much sooner than anyone had expected. "Dr. Martinez," the voice on the phone said, "this is President Carter. I need you to drop everything you're working on and focus on a new project. Madam President, I want you to build weapons that can destroy entire star systems. I want weapons that can make the Council regret they were ever born." Dr. Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. She had always been a scientist first and a weapons designer second. She believed in using technology to help humanity, not to destroy other species. But as she read the reports from New Valerian, her perspective began to change. The Valerians had been scientists too. They had used their crystal technology to create beauty and harmony. They had shared their knowledge freely with humans because they believed in cooperation and friendship. The Council had murdered them for it. "I'll need access to the Valerian technology they shared with us," Dr. Martinez said.
"Oh.
"And I'll need a team of our best engineers." "You'll have whatever you need," President Carter replied. "Money is no object. Time is no object. I want weapons that will make the Council afraid to leave their home worlds." Captain Danny Rodriguez was one of the survivors from Valerian Station. He had been found floating in space 3 days after the attack, barely alive in a damaged escape pod. The medical team had saved his life, but they could not save his mind from the memories of what he had seen. Danny had watched his friends die. He had seen Valerian soldiers who had never hurt anyone in their lives being cut down by Council weapons. He had heard the musical screams of Valerian children as the station exploded around them. The sound still echoed in his head every time. He tried to sleep. The World Assembly had asked Danny to testify about what he had witnessed. He stood at the podium in the Great Hall, looking out at representatives from every nation on Earth. The hall was completely silent as he began to speak. "I want to tell you about my friend Zethka," Danny said. "He was a Valerian soldier who had been learning human combat techniques. He was young and eager to learn. Asked me once why humans fought so hard to protect their friends. I told him that friendship was worth fighting for." Danny paused and looked around the hall. "When the Council ships attacked, Zethka tried to use what I had taught him to defend the civilian areas. He knew he couldn't win, but he fought anyway, because he had learned from humans that some things are worth dying for." The hall remained silent, but Danny could see the anger building in the faces of the representatives. "Zethka died protecting human families," Danny continued. "He died because he chose to be our friend. The Council killed him for that choice. They killed him and 4 billion others because they dared to like humans." Danny stepped closer to the microphone. "The Council wants us to be afraid. They want us to abandon our friends and submit to their authority. But I have a message for the Galactic Council." He looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting his words to the galaxy. "You killed the wrong species, friends. You made the wrong species angry. And now you're going to learn what humans do to people who hurt their family." The vote was taken immediately after Danny's testimony. Every representative voted in favor of military action against the Galactic Council. There were no dissenting votes, no calls for diplomatic solutions, no suggestions to try peaceful negotiations. The Galactic Council had declared war on humanity by destroying their friends. Now humanity would show them what war really meant. Admiral Matthews coordinated the military response from the Pentagon. The building was buzzing with activity as officers and analysts worked around the clock to plan the largest military operation in human history. The scale of what they were attempting was unprecedented. "The Council controls 12 star systems," Admiral Matthews explained to his staff. "They have ruled those systems for over 1,000 years. They have never been successfully challenged. Colonel Amy Johnson, the head of fleet operations, studied the star charts. Their fleets are scattered across their territory. If we hit them simultaneously, they won't be able to reinforce each other. That's exactly what we're going to do, Admiral Matthews replied. We're going to hit all 12 systems at once. We're going to show them that humans don't forget and we don't forgive. The shipyards around Earth worked day and night to build the new war fleet. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever constructed. They combined human engineering with Valerian crystal technology to create vessels that were faster and more powerful than anything the Council had seen. But more important than the technology was the motivation of the crews. Every human who volunteered for the mission had seen the videos from New Valerian. They had heard the testimonies of the survivors. They knew that they were not just fighting for Earth, but for the memory of 4 billion innocent beings who had been murdered for the crime of friendship. Dr. Campbell worked with the weapons teams to develop new forms of biological warfare. The Valerians had taught humans about the genetic structures of other alien species, sharing their knowledge freely. As they shared everything else, now that knowledge would be used to create weapons that could target specific alien physiologies. The Council thinks they're safe in their ivory towers, Dr. Campbell said to her research team. They think they can murder peaceful species and face no consequences. We're going to show them that they're wrong. The preparation took 2 years. 2 years of building, planning, and focusing all of humanity's rage into a single purpose. The Galaxy Council dismissed the human military buildup as meaningless posturing. They had crushed dozens of species that had tried to challenge them. What could one young species possibly do? They were about to find out. The age of Council dominance was ending. The age of human vengeance was about to begin. Colonel Amy Johnson stood in the main construction bay of Earth's largest orbital shipyard, watching as the new war fleet took shape. The ships were massive, dark, and deadly. They looked nothing like the peaceful exploration vessels that humanity had built before the massacre. These were instruments of revenge, built for one purpose only. The lead ship was called the EAS Valerian's Revenge. It was 3 times larger than any human warship ever built, powered by Valerian crystal technology that had been modified for destruction instead of creation. The ship's hull was covered in weapons that could tear apart entire fleets. Its engines could push it faster than any Council ship. How many ships will be ready for the attack? Asked General Brooks, who had come to inspect the fleet's progress. 48 capital ships and 200 smaller vessels, Colonel Johnson replied. Each one is crewed by volunteers who lost friends on New Valerian. They're not fighting for Earth anymore, General. They're fighting for their fallen family. The workers in the shipyard moved with purpose and determination. Many of them had relatives or friends who had died in the massacre. They worked 8 shifts without complaint, driven by the need to honor the memory of the peaceful Valerians who had welcomed humans with open arms. Dr. Martinez walked through the weapons testing facility, checking on the progress of her team. The facility was hidden deep underground, protected by multiple layers of security. What they were creating here would change the nature of warfare forever. Status report, she said to her lead engineer, a brilliant woman named Carol Watson. Biological weapons are ready for deployment, Carol replied. We've created 12 different variants, each one designed to target a specific Council species. The Valerian's genetic databases were more complete than we ever imagined. Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. The Valerians had shared their knowledge freely, never thinking it would be used to create weapons of mass destruction. But the Council had forced humanity's hand. They had shown no mercy to the innocent, so they would receive none in return. Ow! About the psychological warfare systems? Dr. Martinez asked. Those are even more effective, Carol said with a cold smile. We've studied Council communications and learned what they fear most. Our broadcasts will be transmitted directly into their cities, showing them exactly what happened to the Valerians. They'll know that the same fate awaits them. Commander Tony Williams was training the new generation of human soldiers at the military academy. These were not the same kind of soldiers that Earth had produced before. They were harder, colder, and completely focused on their mission of revenge. Listen carefully, Tony told his trainees. The Council expects us to fight like the other species they've conquered. They expect us to follow their rules, to fight with honor, to show mercy to the defeated. He paused and looked at each soldier individually. We're going to disappoint them. We're going to fight like humans. We're going to fight dirty, smart, and without mercy. The Council killed our friends, and we're going to make them pay for every single life. The trainees nodded with grim determination. Many of them had volunteered specifically to avenge the Valerians. They'd seen the videos of crystal children playing in the streets before the massacre. They had heard the musical cries of the dying. They would not rest until every Council world burned. Intelligence Chief Maria Santos coordinated the spy network that had been established throughout Council territory. Every human trader, diplomat, and tourist had become a potential intelligence asset. The Council had allowed humans to travel freely through their space, never imagining that those same humans would become their enemies. We have agents on every Council world, Maria reported to Admiral Matthews. They've been mapping military installations, government buildings, and civilian infrastructure. When we attack, we'll know exactly where to hit for maximum impact. The intelligence network had also been collecting information about Council culture and psychology. Humans learned that the Council species were arrogant and overconfident. It ruled the galaxy for so long that they could not imagine being defeated. This arrogance would be their downfall. Captain Morrison was back on Earth, recovering from his injuries and preparing for the coming war. His ship, the EA's Liberty, had been destroyed in the massacre, but he had been given command of one of the new revenge ships. He spent his days studying Council tactics and planning how to defeat them. His daughter Emma was staying with her grandparents while Morrison prepared for the mission. She was only 8 years old, but she understood that her father was going to fight the bad aliens who had hurt her crystal friends. She had drawn pictures of Valerian children and given them to her father to carry with him. "Daddy," she had said, "make sure the bad aliens never hurt anyone's friends again." Morrison looked at those drawings every day. They reminded him why he was fighting. This was not about conquest or glory. This was about protecting the innocent and making sure that peaceful species like the Valerians could exist without fear. Dr. Campbell worked with the military planners to identify the best targets. On each Council world, her knowledge of alien biology and culture were invaluable in planning attacks that would cause maximum psychological damage. The Zelthani are the most militaristic of the Council species, she explained to the planning committee. They were the ones who led the attack on New Valerian. They should be our primary target. She pulled up star charts showing the Zelthani home system. Their entire culture is built around the concept of military superiority. If we can defeat them decisively, it will send a message to the other Council species that humanity cannot be intimidated. The planning committee studied the data carefully. The Zelthani homeworld was heavily defended, with orbital weapons, platforms, and a large fleet. But humanity had advantages that the Council did not expect. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Human weapons were more accurate and more destructive. Most importantly, human soldiers fought with a fury that the Council had never encountered. Captain Rodriguez had recovered from his injuries and was now leading a squadron of bomber ships. His pilots were all survivors from Valerian Station, or New Valerian. They had lost everything to the Council's cruelty, and they were eager to return the favor. Our mission is simple, Rodriguez told his squadron. We're going to hit every major city on every Council world. We're going to destroy their infrastructure, their government buildings, and their military bases. We're going to make them afraid to leave their homes. The bomber ships were equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. They could strike targets with precision from long range, or they could carpet bomb entire areas with devastating effect. The choice would depend on the target and the tactical situation. The Psychological Warfare Division worked on developing messages that would be broadcast to Council worlds during the attack. These messages would show the Council populations exactly what had happened to the Valerians and explain why humanity was seeking revenge. We want them to understand that this is not random violence, explained the division's leader, a former news reporter named Jennifer Kane. We want them to know that this is justice. They killed our friends, and now they will pay the price. The messages included footage from the massacre, testimonies from survivors, and images of the destroyed crystal cities. They were designed to create fear and despair among the council populations, to make them understand that their governments had brought this destruction upon them. The final phase of preparation involved coordinating the timing of the attacks. All 12 council systems would be hit simultaneously, preventing them from reinforcing each other or mounting a coordinated defense. The attacks would begin at exactly the same moment, measured in Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Matthews stood in the command center, surrounded by displays showing the positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. In just a few hours, the largest military operation in human history would begin. The fate of the Council would be decided by the fury of a species that had learned to channel its grief into devastating warfare. "All fleets report ready for operation," announced the communications officer. Admiral Matthews nodded. "Send the signal. Operation Valerian's Revenge is authorized to begin." The message was transmitted to every human ship in the galaxy. The time for planning and preparation was over. The time for revenge had finally come. The Council would learn what happened when they made humans angry. The human war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Council territory like a swarm of angry hornets. 12 separate attack groups appeared simultaneously around 12 different star systems, each one targeting a Council homeworld. The timing was perfect, coordinated down to the second across the vast distances of space. Admiral Matthews commanded the main fleet from his flagship, the AS Vengeance. Through the bridge windows, he could see the Zelthani homeworld hanging in space like a blue-green marble. This was the world of the species that had led the attack on New Valerian. This was where the massacre had been planned and ordered. "Ships, this is Admiral Matthews," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Today we honor our fallen friends. Today we show the galaxy that humanity protects its family. Attack." Captain Morrison led the first wave of ships toward the Zelthani homeworld. His new ship, the EAS Valerian's Revenge, cut through space like a knife. The ship's weapons were charged and ready. It's powered by the same crystal technology that the Valerians had shared freely with humanity. Now that peaceful technology had been turned into an instrument of war, the Zelthani defense fleet moved to intercept the human ships. But they were not prepared for what they faced. Human ships moved faster and hit harder than anything the Council had ever encountered. Morrison's ship alone destroyed 3 Zelthani cruisers in the first minute of combat. "Target their orbital defense platforms," Morrison ordered his weapons officer. "I want their homeworld completely defenseless." The Zelthani had ruled their part of the galaxy for over 800 years. They had never faced an enemy that could match their military power. They were about to learn that humanity had spent 2 years preparing for this day, and they had not wasted a single moment. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Rodriguez led his bomber squadron against the Thureni homeworld. The Thureni were the Council's scientists and engineers. They had designed the antimatter weapons that had destroyed the crystal cities of New Valerian. Now they would see those same weapons turned against their own cities. Remember, Rodriguez told his pilots over the communication channel, "We're not here to conquer, we're here to make them pay. Every building they destroy, every life they take from us, we return with interest." The bomber ships swept down through the Thureni atmosphere like falling stars. Their weapons lit up the sky as they struck government buildings, military bases, and industrial centers. The Thureni had never experienced warfare on their own world. They had always been the ones attacking other planets. Now they learned what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Dr. Campbell coordinated the biological warfare attacks from her command ship in orbit around the Nexari homeworld. The Nexari were the Council's diplomats and administrators. They had written the laws that declared the Valerian alliance illegal. It signed the orders that condemned 4 billion innocent beings to death. "Release the biological agents over their major population centers," Dr. Campbell ordered. Her voice was calm and professional, but her eyes burned with cold fury. "Make sure they understand that this is what happens when you murder peaceful species." The biological weapons had been designed specifically for Nexari physiology using the genetic information that the Valerians had freely shared with humanity. The weapons would not kill instantly, but they would cause the Nexari to suffer the same fear and helplessness that the Valerians had experienced during their final hours. General Brooks led the ground assault teams that landed on the Korthak homeworld. The Korthak were the Council's military enforcers, the ones who carried out the actual attacks on species that defied Council authority. They had been present at the massacre of New Valerian, watching as innocent civilians died. "No prisoners," General Brooks told his soldiers as they landed in the Korthak capital city. "They showed no mercy to our friends, we showed none to them." The human soldiers moved through the city like ghosts, striking at military installations and government buildings before disappearing into the urban landscape. They used tactics that the Council had never seen before: guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and psychological operations designed to create maximum fear and confusion. The Korthak military tried to respond, but they were used to fighting conventional battles against organized armies. Human special forces fought like shadows, appearing suddenly to strike and then vanishing before the enemy could react. Within hours, the Korthak capital was in chaos. Intelligence Chief Maria Santos watched the attacks unfold from the command center on Earth. Her spy network had done its job perfectly, providing real-time intelligence about enemy movements and weaknesses. Every human attack had been precisely targeted for maximum psychological impact. "The Council is trying to coordinate their defenses," she reported to President Carter. "But they're in complete panic. They'd never expected to face an enemy that could strike all their worlds simultaneously." President Carter stood before the massive display screens that showed the progress of Operation Valerian's Revenge. 12 Council worlds were burning, their governments collapsing, their military forces scattered and demoralized. Species that had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years were learning what it meant to face human rage. "Any word from the Council leadership?" President Carter asked. "They're trying to negotiate," Maria replied. "They want to discuss terms for ending the conflict." President Carter's expression hardened. "Tell them that the time for negotiation ended when they murdered our friends. We'll accept nothing less than complete surrender." Commander Williams led the assault on the Council's main military command center, located on a fortified asteroid. In deep space, this was where the orders for the Valerian massacre had been transmitted from. This was the heart of the Council's military power. The asteroid's defenses were formidable, but human engineers had studied the station's design for months using intelligence gathered by their spy network. They knew exactly where the weak points were located. Williams' ship struck those weak points with devastating precision. "Breaching charges set," reported the demolition team leader. "Ready to destroy their command computers." "Do it," Williams ordered. "Make sure they can never coordinate another massacre like the one at New Valerian." The explosions tore through the asteroid's core, destroying the communication systems that the Council used to control their vast empire. Without their command center, the Council fleets were reduced to isolated groups fighting desperate defensive actions. Dr. Martinez watched from her laboratory as the weapons she had designed performed exactly as intended. The biological agents were spreading through Council populations, causing panic and despair. The psychological warfare broadcasts were being transmitted to every Council world, showing the populations exactly why humanity was attacking them. "The Council's species are experiencing complete social breakdown," she reported to Admiral Matthews. "They're seeing the footage of the Valerian massacre and realizing that their own governments brought this destruction upon them." The broadcasts included the testimonies of human survivors, telling the galaxy about the peaceful Valerians who had been murdered simply for choosing friendship over isolation. The images of crystal children playing in the streets before the massacre were particularly effective at generating sympathy for the human cause. "Captain, Morrison's ship entered orbit around the Zelthani homeworld as the planet's defenses finally collapsed. The proud Zelthani military, which had never been defeated in battle, was retreating in complete disorder. Their ships fled toward the outer system, abandoning their homeworld to the human attackers. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Zelthani cities." Morrison looked down at the planet that had ordered the destruction of New Valerian. The Zelthani were begging for mercy now, just as the Valerians had begged during their final moments. But mercy was something that the Council had never shown to their victims. "Continue the bombardment," Morrison ordered. They wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson about the consequences of defying them. Now we're teaching them a lesson about the consequences of murdering our friends. Within 72 hours, all 12 Council homeworlds were either destroyed or completely under human control. The Galactic Council's fleets were scattered, their governments overthrown, their populations facing the same terror that they had inflicted on countless other species. The survivors would spend decades rebuilding their shattered civilizations, always knowing that humanity was still out there, still watching, still remembering. The galaxy had learned what humans were capable of when their family was threatened. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of human justice had begun. The ruins of New Valerian, the crystal fragments, still sang their haunting songs, finally at peace, knowing that their deaths had been avenged.